Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz,
Hello.
And this week we have a very, very, very special guest, Captain Fakeye, Dr. Captain Fakeye.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Captain Fakeye.
She is one of the spooky community. She actually hosted SpookyCon this past year, and she is the host of, well, one of the hosts of How the Quest Was Won, as well as Twats of Twats.
This is true. She came in, and we had asked her to do a guest spot originally on Twats of Twats, and immediately after recording, we were like, we should probably have her be on every episode ever to increase our numbers and professionalism and overall knowledge. But thank you so much for joining us, Captain Fakeye.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm still super fangirling over here.
What?
You've met us in person.
I know.
We slept in your guest room.
I know, and I was fangirling the whole time. Just very creepily in the other room.
You're just way cooler than we are. We are not cool.
That is not true.
I will say I'm super happy to have you on the show. We've had many conversations off the air about some of the things that you've gone through, medical side, some of this massive amount of knowledge in your doctor brain, and it's all super fascinating. I'm really excited for this particular episode. So I know that you're bringing the thunder. You're our first special guest to ever write a script. It's so impressive. So we're going to give you a gold star now. We're not going to wait until the end of the show.
Well, I wrote this script so that I wouldn't just be stumbling over my words while I told you these stories.
Realistically, I think all of our special guests, they come in and they have that same nerve, and then out of nowhere, it just becomes a really good episode. So we're fairly confident that's going to happen. And if it's not, it's probably going to be on our end. So don't worry one bit.
All I can hear is that song from Hamilton where about Philip, where they're like, "You're gonna blow us all away."
Oh, blow us all away.
Blow us all away. That's what Faye's about to do.
We're putting a lot of pressure on Faye now. So
You mean pressure like a tick, tick, tick?
Oh,
she nailed it.
We're just gonna have all the Lin-Manuel Miranda references this episode.
He's everywhere. There's nothing you can do but reference the stuff he's doing nowadays. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
And if you haven't seen Encanto, go see it. It's so great.
Yes, 100%. I've seen it probably 10 times already, so it's pretty awesome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you, Faye. You can sort of introduce yourself since we did an introduction, and then, we talked about some of the stuff you're on, and then what you're going to talk about first. We're excited. I feel like I'm in the audience for a show
right?
Scaryish
That's
right now.
That's how I feel right now.
I'm really happy for this, so take it away.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on the show, guys. My name's Faye. And I, like you guys said, I'm part of the spooky community. So I'm going to be coming on today to tell you guys a few stories. Not all of them are personal, but I thought that I would kind of tell you a few disaster stories / scary-ish stories that have to do with medicine and science. So the first is going to be a personal story of mine. And then the following couple will be not necessarily personal, but there are some connections to me and things like that. So hope you guys are excited.
I'm very excited.
I am too.
Medical things that occur, just I find that absolutely fascinating.
Plus you said the titular line of Scaryish, so
Jesus.
It's we're locked in. I think this is going to be the first episode where we could kind of compete with Sawbones. So that's what I'm hanging my hat on for this episode.
That's a lot of pressure.
So much more pressure.
The only other episode we actually did wind up incidentally competing with Sawbones. It's a medical podcast with Justin and Sydney, right? Justin and Sydney McElroy.
Yeah.
Was the Havana Syndrome episode, because I covered it because it was in the news again. And then they covered it, and it released 12 hours apart. And Faye was the one that told me oh my God, they covered this too. And I was like, theirs is going to be so much better. So anyways, let's dive into your first story. I know you submitted this actually as a topic suggestion, right? When I was saying I was going to do Disaster December, and you had mentioned you had firsthand experience on this particular one. I was like, that's when I had the idea, we need to have her come on the show. So tell us about this.
Yeah, so this is, I titled this The Ringling Brothers Human Chandelier Disaster.
What?
Yeah, so
what?
It's a crazy story.
Okay.
So this is probably one of my craziest experiences when I was in medical school. And, just kind of off the bat, I'm not going to use any names or identifying information, but you can actually Google this and read all about this. So this was May of 2014. Cue Adam. We all remember 2014, right?
Y'all remember 2014, right?
So I was a third year medical student at this time. I had like just started my like clerkships, which are like our clinical rotations.
Okay.
And so to like give you some perspective, I was like pretty young and dumb. I was like 23, 24. We just finished our first 2 years, which is like, I guess you can call it like quote unquote book learning, where we like do lectures, we read textbooks, we like do our cadaver labs. But like really your third and fourth years when you like go into the wards and you actually like practice your like, you know, people skills. Like you do your physical exams and you actually like take histories from people. And this is like where you really learn to like be a doctor instead of just like a textbook reader, I guess you could say.
At this point, would you say your medical career has been more like Scrubs and you're moving into like the House Grey's Anatomy side of things? I only view things from the shows that I've watched on TV.
I feel like no one has ever really made accurate depictions of medical students on TV shows, because if they did, nobody would watch it. It would just be hours and hours of someone crying as they're like reading a textbook.
Oh my God.
So this sounds like The Good Doctor, but the Korean version, where people slap him when they're mad at him and they all scream at each other. That sounds like more accurate.
Yeah, that's like very much like the first 2 years of medical school. Exactly. Yeah. And then except the
Okay,
crying
I
is
can
like
picture
in your
this now.
room by yourself, you know?
That's so sad.
I make it sound so sad, but if you're interested in medical school, it's fine. It's great. There will be lots of crying, but you'll be okay at the end. So anyway, like when you're doing your core clinicals, you like go through some of the like different rotations, like internal medicine, like pediatric surgery, OBGYN, neurology, psychiatry, family medicine. And it's kind of a way for people to get exposure to like the different specialties for you to like then pick like, oh, I want to do this in the future. I want to do this. So I was on my second rotation. I had just finished psychiatry, which, you know, had nothing to do with the second like rotation that I had, which was general surgery. And I had heard like all these horror stories that I think a lot of people do, like, oh, in general surgery, like people are mean, the residents are mean, the hours are long, no one's gonna bother to learn your name. But anyway, I was like still pretty excited because like I really wanted to like be in the operating room. I wanted to like see all these cool cases. I had also watched a lot of like Grey's Anatomy, and I was like, it's gonna be amazing.
You're like, I'm gonna sleep with him and I'm gonna sleep. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that hot. No, when you're a resident, it's like no one is hot because you're all sleep deprived and you all look horrible and no one's wearing makeup. And if you have time off, you're like, I'm going to go sleep. I don't want to sleep with anybody. I'm just going to go sleep on myself.
Stay away from me.
Exactly. So anyway, I was basically starting my general surgery rotation, and the first thing that I was starting on was called trauma nights, which is basically you're like running around all night with the trauma surgery resident and you're answering like trauma calls that come from the emergency room, right? It sounds crazy, and it was. And you basically like see all these people who get into some type of trauma, and you determine like who is like urgent enough that they need trauma surgery that night, right? Like there's no scheduled cases because it's overnight, but you know, I was told by previous students that you're still going to spend a lot of time in the operating room because we were the only level 1 trauma center like in our area. So, you know, you can imagine me, I'm like coming in, it's like Sunday night. I don't even know where the bathroom is because like I've never been to this part of the hospital. And like you walk in, you're wearing like your short white coat. You're like, hi guys, I'm the medical student. And like they hand you the pager and like, you know, you're basically told like stick with your resident, you know, get your histories and do your physical exams when you're told, and then make sure you run to the emergency room whenever your pager goes off. And so like it was myself and there was one other medical student on with me, and we were basically told like when the pager comes through, you're going to get different like letters, and the letters will tell you like how fast you need to run to get to the emergency room. So like,
oh my God, okay.
A level C trauma is like the lowest level. And that was like, I don't know, like someone like had a paper cut or something or whatever. So you don't need to run that
Severe
fast.
stubbed toe.
Right, exactly. So like, you know, you can like take the stairs slowly or whatever. Level B was like, you know, someone who probably like broke their like leg or something like that. So you like probably want to run a little faster. Like level A is like someone's in a car accident. They need to be stabilized and they probably need surgery that night. And then like level like AAA was like the highest level, and that's like someone who's like dead, like they're getting like chest compressions and coded and everything, and like you should probably run pretty fast. So, like, I, like, get there, I, like, sit down, put my stuff down, I, like, log in the computer, like, oh, I don't know how to log in, guys. And, you get onto the ED board because, like, what you do is you, like, stalk the emergency room board and you're like, who's coming in? Who am I going to get paged about? Blah, 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 right?
Okay.
So, like, I put my stuff down, I, like, open up the computer, and, like, I felt like as soon as that happened, like, the pager starts going off. Like, my pager goes off, the resident's pager goes off, like, the other medical student's pager go off, and, like, you, like, pick it up with this pager. First of all, you're like, I don't even know how to use this thing because, like, who uses pagers anymore? And I, like, start flipping through it, and I'm like, okay, this is the first page, and it says code triage. And I was like,
what?
We've never been taught what this code is. Like, what is code triage? And, like, I'm about to ask, but, like, I didn't even, like, get the words out of my mouth. And the resident was, like, on their feet. And they were like, we need to go to the emergency room immediately. And so we were, like, running down the stairs.
Did you, like, stop him on his way out? Like, I know we have all these advances in medical science. Why are we using the technology of 90s drug dealers to communicate these messages to each other?
No, you don't ask these things because you're the medical student and they, like, haven't even learned your name. And so, and, like, true story be told, through my entire general surgery rotation, I'm pretty sure, like, none of the residents learned my name. Like, myself and the other medical student, we were, like, collectively called Bucket, because we held a pink tub that had all the wound supplies in it.
Oh, okay.
I know, it's, like, not nice, but I've been told that the residency has improved now.
I suppose it could be worse, but that is pretty dehumanizing to hear.
Yeah, to be called Bucket instead of your name. Yeah, a little bit. So anyway, we're, like, running down the stairs to the emergency room because, in surgery, nobody ever takes the elevators. You only ever take the stairs for some reason. Like, surgeons, whatever. We're badass, I guess. We don't take elevators. I don't know. So the emergency room, like, at Rhode Island Hospital, it's, like, huge. There's, like, 6 bays, and then there's, like, the trauma bays. There's, like, probably 80 rooms. And we get there, and there's, like, all these people that are just, like, pouring out of ambulances. And we finally understand that, like,
oh my God,
code triage means that there's, like, a ton of people coming into the emergency room, and, like, it's, like, all hands on deck, essentially, right?
So you have to triage them, right? Like, you need service now. You guys can wait. Like,
exactly.
This person needs to go. Okay.
Yeah. So it's, like, code triage because, like, everybody needs to get down there because there's, like, a ton of people coming in. And it was, like, kind of, like, surreal at the time to see because, like, it was, like, my first experience in the emergency room, and all you see are all these, like, acrobats, like, being wheeled out of the, like, ambulance, like, in their stretchers with their, like, C collars on, and they're, like, all, like, young and, like, fit women, and they're, like, wearing, like, they're, like, glittery, like, leotards and stuff like that, and I was just like, what is happening? And I, like, literally felt, I was like, is this Grey's Anatomy? Like, why are there, like,
this sounds like a Grey's Anatomy episode.
Like, why are there acrobats coming out of, like, the ambulance? And, like, I'm laughing, but it's not funny because, like, these people were, like, obviously very hurt. Like, it was pretty clear from them, like, coming through the emergency room that, like, a lot of them had broken bones, and, like, the orthopedic surgery resident was already there, like, the ED staff was there, everyone's, like, busy kind of, like, putting in IVs, getting histories, and, like, as a medical student, you're like, well, I'm useless, and so you're, like, in the corner, just, like, holding your notebook, being like, so would you like me to listen to their heart? Like, just, like, completely useless, right?
I have a stethoscope.
Exactly. I had, like, just done psychiatry. So, I was like, and how do you feel about that? Just, like, completely useless. So essentially, like, as I'm standing there, like, listening to, like, the doctors and the nurses, like, it comes out that what had happened was, like, these acrobats were all part of a circus who had come to perform at, like, the local convention center. And they had been part of this act called the Madeiros Hair Hang Act, and, like, the Human Lotus Blossom, which is, like, it sounds crazy, but essentially they were hung, like, from this apparatus, like, in a ring with, like, a bunch of acrobats, like, all holding hands by their hair.
What?
And then, right, it's crazy. Like, all of their hair was, like, in, like, a really high ponytail, and then their hair was, like, rigged into, like, this apparatus, and then they would do, like, tricks, like, while they were, like, holding hands or, like, linking arms, whatever. It's
sounds
insane.
like an awful idea.
Right. And so exactly because that night, like something that held the apparatus, like one of the beams or harnesses, like just snapped. Like if you like read the news articles, essentially like someone said like they heard like a snap and then all of a sudden like all the acrobats just flew like 15 feet out of the air, like just fell to the ground. And so like a ton of them, obviously had like broken limbs, like ribs and spines. But very fortunately, like nobody died from this. Like they were all just like pretty hurt from like, having like broken bones.
Did anyone have their hair ripped out or anything?
Which is crazy. Like, I don't actually understand how anyone was supported by their hair. Like, I didn't watch the actual circus. But you can actually see this event happen, like, on the news articles and stuff like that, where that, like, come out. Like, there are people who are, like, filming this on their phones,
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Overall, I know, it's crazy. So, for most of these young women, it was like a pretty long road to recovery. And then, like, I think if I recall, like a lot of them were just like in the hospital for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And like most of them could like not go back to performing because like they were so injured from like what happened that they couldn't go back to being like acrobats essentially.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was, again, I was like literally just standing in the corner being like, oh, I didn't realize things like this happen in real life. So anyway, like most of them had orthopedic issues, right? Like they had broken bones and stuff. So like as the trauma surgery team, we weren't the ones to take them to the operating room if they needed to. They would like go with the orthopedics team because they were like fixing like spines, ribs, like broken bones. And so, we just kind of like were like, okay, like this issue is done after like several hours, and we were like about to like go upstairs, and then all of a sudden like the pager just goes off again, and it's just like how it happened the entire night. Like basically like as soon as we thought we were done, the pager would go off, level AAA, and it was just crazy. So the entire night was like that, and then before I knew it, it was like the sun was coming up. I had done like chest compressions for the first time. I was like in the OR like retracting in an abdomen. Like I sutured a scalp lock by myself because someone thought that was okay to do for the first day medical student. And like I had like worked a 12-hour shift and I wasn't tired, and it was like my first exposure to like trauma surgery and disaster, and I just felt like I was like, oh, I learned a lot about myself, like I like run towards disaster instead of away from it. I'm like I have a pretty strong stomach for bodily fluids, and I could stay away through the night. So I loved it. Obviously like it was great to like be in the like in that place to like help people, even if I didn't know what I was doing at all that day. And then I didn't end up going into trauma surgery, but then I felt like this was kind of what shaped me to help me pick like the specialty that I would eventually go into. Because I knew that like I loved emergencies and I loved the operating room. Anyway, yeah. So that is the Ringling Brothers human chandelier disaster.
That's crazy.
That is
for your first night ever, doing trauma. That's wow.
I have to say too, there's a certain level of crossover between like true crime and like medical issues where obviously your heart goes out to the person who's suffering during it, but it's so fascinating to hear about. It's hard not to be like, that's awesome. Like a chandelier of human beings fell. That should sound horrific. But as soon as you talked about it, I was like, tell me more. And having this be like day one stuff, like, don't get me wrong, I've had jobs where I've cried as well. Like, I've worked GameStop. Anyone who's worked retail has probably had a breakdown, but
I have cried multiple times working at GameStop.
You've never had ambulances filled with just people that have had something horrible happen. And, like, everyone's had that moment at whatever job you've worked at some point where you're like, I'm new, I don't know what to do. And knowing that it's, like, super high stakes, that is super intense. So, good job, I gotta say. Well done.
Well, thanks. I mean, everyone has supervision and you like eventually get the hang of things, but it was definitely one of like here you go, like here's the deep end of the swimming pool, day one.
That's so cool.
But yeah. So that's the story of the human chandelier.
And how you became a doctor.
Yeah, how you earned your stripes.
I don't know if that was how I earned my stripes. I feel like, like it sounds cool, but like literally most of the night I was like standing in the corner with my notebook being like, oh, that looks bad.
The professional opinion of that looks bad.
Should that leg be like that?
Just
I don't know. Just like it's that person's like first day, and like you just say like annoying things because you don't know like what you're actually supposed to do. Like that was definitely me. My resident was probably like, "Who is this dumb bitch?"
I'm just imagining because the fact that you had just come from psychiatry, you're just like mentally all you can think about is how they're the patient's handling it, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm picturing someone with like broken legs, like screaming, and someone's like shouting, like, "I need an IV," and blah 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 blah, and you're next to them with like a clipboard, like, "How does this make you feel?"
Like, it makes me feel terrible. My legs are broken.
That's so
Oh
funny.
my god.
All right, so let's transition into the next story you have, the one that is not about a chandelier of human beings collapsing to the ground in the aftermath that you lived through of sorting through that. So what do you have on deck for us that's, I guess, second in line?
Yeah, so second in line, I have it's not a personal story, but it is a very, I think, sad medical story, and it did happen at my current workplace, which is the University of Pennsylvania, even though it was like a long time ago, like more than 20 years ago. And I wanted to talk about this story because I think it highlights a lot of what people like are afraid of in terms of medical and scientific research, and how, we as a research community have arrived at many of the like rules and regulations of human research and what we have nowadays. And I think it's important that we be transparent about the issues and like the badness that has happened in medical history and talk about how to correct them, and hopefully like, how we can improve on that and just be transparent about like the bad things that have happened. So this is the story of Jessie Gelsinger and his death from gene therapy. I will say it's also like scarily, the story sounds like a zombie origin movie.
What?
Wow.
So and you'll kind of like hear about why. So this story essentially started in 1999 with a teenager named Jessie Gelsinger, who's from Tucson, Arizona. And he had a really rare medical disorder called ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency, or OTC deficiency. Nobody can say it 3 times fast. Basically, his body like didn't have enough of a certain enzyme that helps break down nitrogen in the urea cycle. And so what can happen is that depending on the level of deficiency, people with OTCD can get super high levels of ammonia that build up in their blood. And that can eventually lead to things like comas, brain damage, and death. And the reason we need to break down nitrogen is just because of like the food we consume that will lead to this buildup, and our body naturally can get rid of it by breaking it down, and then we pee it out. But people who have this issue can't do that very well. And most people who have like really severe OTCD will die in infancy. But Jessie actually had like what we consider, I guess, a quote unquote mild form of the disease. And by mild, I mean that he could still break down some nitrogen, but he had to follow this really special like low protein diet, and he had to take a ton of medications to be able to control his disease.
Oh, wow.
And I was reading like in some articles where he would have to take up to almost 50 pills a day to like control his disease. So
wow.
What?
Right.
I mean, if your alternative is death.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We say mild because he's able to live, and he was able to live until he was a teenager. But like clearly, this was something that was very disruptive to his life, right? And you can imagine like for a teenage boy who probably wants to like hang out with his friends who are, all like eating like protein powder and like working out at the gym, like this was probably something that really like messed with him, and like he probably like didn't want to live with this anymore. And there were times in his life where he was just like, you know what, like I hate being sick, I don't want to like have this disease anymore, and he would like stop taking his medicines, and like his parents would find him like vomiting uncontrollably, and multiple times he would like get admitted to the hospital. He had to be like intubated, he had to be put into like a medical coma so that like his doctors could bring his ammonia levels down,
It's crazy to think that like that level of angst that you get as a teenager of like not wanting to be in the situation you're in, not wanting to deal with the things you have to deal with, even applies to someone that has a condition like that, where rejecting the fact you have this condition and the steps you need to take to prevent death can still be something that you say, well, you know what? I've just decided that I don't want to take these pills anymore. And they know full and well what the consequences of that might be. As someone that has a brother basically who has the option of like, take medication or have severe consequences, I still see him go through that cycle of, well, I'm just not going to take it, and seeing that sort of like, I don't know, devastation that it can cause. It's not at that level, but just the idea that someone has the option. It's like, if you don't take these 50 pills a day and have this strict diet, you're probably going to die. And just, having that human rejection of like, but I don't want to do this anymore. Like, that's got to be so rough on a person.
Yeah, and it's just like, it highlights like how human that is, right? Because I think we can all kind of relate to that. We're like, we just want to be like everybody else. And I'm sure like as a teenage boy, he was like, I want to be like everybody else. I don't want to have to like follow this diet and like take all these pills and be sick all the time, So one of his doctors actually like knew Jessie pretty well and was like, hey, listen, you clearly aren't happy living like this. And there's this clinical trial going on at Penn where they're doing a study on gene therapy to treat OTC deficiency. And basically the idea was to use gene therapy to fix the gene for the protein, the ornithine transcarbamylase protein, so that those with the deficiency could now make that protein again and produce normal levels of this enzyme so that it can then avoid this ammonia buildup. So essentially, like, you don't have this enzyme, your gene for this is broken. Let's introduce this new gene that's actually going to make the enzyme, like it's going to fix it and it's going to make the enzyme for you, right? So,
but that's
the
like
idea,
messing with people's DNA, right?
Yeah, it is, right? And that's why it sounds scary, and that's why it sounds like it's like a zombie apocalypse kind of movie.
Oh my god!
So I don't know if you're about to jump into this, but I am curious, when you say stuff like gene therapy, what does that involve? Like,
yeah,
what is the sort of thing that you're going to go through to change like the genetic makeup of your human being like body? So
the idea is that you would create this gene in a lab, and you would actually introduce it via an altered form of a virus, and they altered a form of adenovirus, which is, different types of adenovirus can cause things like common colds and stuff like that, but they had altered it so that even though it would infect your liver cells, just like the way that a virus would, it wouldn't necessarily make you sick. Like, they knocked out all the genes in the virus that would cause sickness. And so the idea was the virus would like infect the liver cells in a human, introduce the gene into the human DNA, and then the gene would be integrated into the human chromosomes, right? Which, again, sounds like super scary zombie stuff, because like this is how the zombie apocalypse, I feel like, happens in every single movie.
It's the T-virus. It's literally, that's what it
or
is.
I Am Legend, they supposedly cured cancer in I Am Legend using like an altered version of the rabies disease, and that's what turns people into the I Am Legend things.
Yeah. So again, this is like zombie movie shit. But I don't want to like scare people to think that like this is what gene therapy is. But, it sounds scary, but actually gene therapy has been used in a really good way to treat certain people. So for example, there is a disease right now called retinitis pigmentosa, which causes irreversible blindness. And again, is caused by a single gene issue. And so there has been gene therapy that's been developed, and you actually can cure people's retinitis pigmentosa with gene therapy. So this is actually going on right now, and like these people are doing well. So I don't want to like make it sound like gene therapy is how we get zombies, right? Like that's not like the point. So not all gene therapy
causes zombies, but zombies could potentially be caused by gene therapy.
Potentially, maybe. We don't know.
I mean, I feel like certain movies you could eat a bad sandwich and the next thing you know you have zombies, so that can happen from a bunch of different reasons. Don't knock gene therapy until you've tried it. Hopefully you don't ever have to try it.
Hopefully you don't have to try it. So, I mean, back to the story, the research around this like OTC deficiency gene therapy was really promising. Like, there were lab rats that they like created that had OTCD, and they treated them with this therapy that had like lived longer than their untreated counterparts. And so essentially Jessie would be part of what we call a phase 1 trial, where we would establish the safety of this gene therapy in humans. And to kind of like introduce, like, I'm sure you guys have heard things like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trial, probably because of like with everything going on in COVID. So to kind of like just quickly go through like what those phases mean. So like a phase 0 trial is like, that's like exploring if and how a new drug or therapy could work. And so you really only put like very small doses in a few people. Phase 1 is like, the question is this treatment safe? So you basically start people off, like, again, a very small population of people with very low doses. You see what side effects there are. It's very well controlled. And you basically say like, okay, what are the side effects? And safety is like the main concern. And you stop the trial if you're like, ooh, like, the side effects or like the issues are not acceptable, so we're not going to continue with this treatment. Phase 2 is then like, does the treatment work? So basically now we kind of ask, okay, so the treatment is safe. Is it actually effective if we test it on a slightly bigger population, and we have two groups, one we don't give the treatment to, one we give the treatment to. And then phase 3 is like, is this treatment that we think that works, is it better than what we already have? So now we're going to like have 2 or 3 groups where we have one group that gets this new treatment, the second group gets the old treatment that we've had for years, and then like the third group potentially gets like, the control or the placebo. And this is usually like with a very large group of patients. It's done in like a multi-centered fashion with like thousands and thousands of people, right? So phase 3 trials really is like, once you're done with that and we think it's okay, that's when we say, okay, we can start like giving this treatment to the general public. So lots of like rules and regulation that goes on. So anyway, Jessie was going to be in a phase 1 trial, so he like flew to Philadelphia, and while some of the previous participants had experienced some like mild flu-like illnesses, and he was kind of told like, you might feel like you have the flu, and again, it's because like that adenovirus, like sometimes it can cause you, it's like the virus that causes the common cold, and a lot of times when your immune system like fights against things, it makes you feel like you have the flu, like that's the feeling. So for Jessie, unfortunately, he had a really bad reaction. And within a day, he was like becoming disoriented. He was like turning yellow, like he had signs of jaundice.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And he had this huge inflammatory response that led to something called disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, which basically like leads you like to start bleeding out of like all of your like orifices. And he had organ failure in his kidney, his liver, his lungs. And then within 4 days of getting treatment, he was dead.
This sounds
Wow.
horrific.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, he could have kept going on, right? Taking 50 pills a day.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, by trying this, he died bleeding out of every hole. Like, how? It's just horrifying.
It is
Yeah,
one of those
like,
things where,
oh.
like we mentioned, this person hated the existence that they were caught in and was looking for a way to not have to deal with it anymore. And there's all these different trials, like, you see this stuff in like media as well, where folks have some sort of incurable disease. A lot of times, like if you're watching a sitcom or whatever, it's like they have cancer or some various form of cancer where there's a trial in Mexico or something that they're going to try out. And it's really weird to hear about it happening in real life and not just being like a plot
Yeah.
device for a show.
It's a horrifying way to die.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think. I don't know. I've never died. I don't know.
I don't know what it's
What's
like. I've
worse.
never died before.
I mean, like, as you can imagine, you guys were saying this is like a horrible way to die. And this was like a young, like generally like young and overall healthy other than this issue, like person. And like it like rocked the medical community and like the research community because no one expected him to die. And essentially what had happened to him made it so that no one wanted to continue experimenting with gene therapy. And it just, like, everyone felt horrible about what happened. No one wanted to continue this type of research because of, like, this bad outcome that happened in this young man. But I guess, like, the good thing that kind of came out of his death was that it also triggered an investigation into things like protocols and conducts of that research team specifically at the University of Pennsylvania. And the health officials essentially found like a ton of lapses in the conduct of the study. So basically, there were 2 other patients that had actually suffered pretty serious side effects as well. They didn't die, but the scientists who were conducting the study didn't immediately report it to the FDA, and they didn't put the study on hold, which is required in a phase 1 study, right? Because you're basically studying safety. You're saying, like, is it safe? And if it's not safe, then we need to stop this study. And they also didn't follow study protocol because in Jessie's pre-study blood work had already showed some liver dysfunction, meaning that like based off of that blood work, he actually wouldn't have qualified for this study. So there was a ton of like lapses in research protocol that they didn't follow.
What?
And right, it's scary. And finally, like the informed consent process was not followed. The researchers hadn't told Jessie about the earlier patients and their side effects. And they actually hadn't told him about the lab animals that had actually been killed at higher doses of being given this adenovirus gene therapy. So a ton of like research protocol things were like not followed.
Wow.
And essentially, like, the person who was, like, heading this lab and heading this, like, gene therapy experiment was, like, shunned for a really long time.
Wow, that is horrific to think about. But it's like
How
those
to
things are
ruin
in
your
place.
career 101.
Yeah, how to kill someone 101. You know, it's like those things are specifically in place to prevent that sort of thing from happening. And I don't know, that seems like a plot of a really bad TV show, or if I were watching it, I'd be like, there is no way anyone would ever get away with this.
Something close to that is like the plot of one of the arcs of The Resident. Have you ever seen The Resident?
No.
It's like super intense, not like Grey's Anatomy, even though a bunch of people do sleep with each other.
Obviously, it's a medical TV show.
But it's really, really intense where it goes into case, like actual medical issues like that, where like neglect and there's one where obviously this show is not about TV shows, but there's an arc where a medical supply company says like, we have high quality parts that are made here in America, and it turns out they are just buying parts from China, sending them to America, repackaging them, and selling them like it's their own. And then people's like heart valves start like failing, and people keep dying. And then they look into the company, and the company's gone. Like it never existed, kind of thing. It's crazy.
I wonder how many writers know about stuff like this, or have done research and found things like this particular study you're talking about, and have just sort of like adjusted it for like the small screen, so to speak, because the real story behind this is kind of horrific. And I wonder whether or not someone would just consider just doing that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like this is where you say like reality is like stranger than fiction. Like you can't make this stuff up, right?
Right.
And I think like this story itself just like it reveals a lot about the importance of like regulations and why we have them, because like this is why we have safety protocols in place so that this can't happen. And it also highlights a lot about like, you know, when you're a researcher and you're a scientist, like I totally understand this need to be like, you know what, I'm really invested in this work that I want to do, and this work that I think is going to change the lives and the health of all of these people. And you really want it to succeed, and you become vested in your own research to the point where you're like, it doesn't matter what I have to do. I really want to push this research forward. And you can't get to that point, right, in your work. But like, I totally get it. I get it. You're like, nobody enters into this world of research or medicine being like, I'm going to kill people.
Yeah.
But like,
Right.
but like you get to the point where you're like, I want my experiment to succeed, and I want to, you know, get my work published and noted. And it's just like a huge warning that, you know, despite our own interests, like we need to keep safety first. And it's why, you know, nowadays we have things like the Institutional Review Board, which is like an ethical review board to say like, okay, this is like, is this ethical to actually conduct this experiment that you want to do? Is there like more risk than benefit? And then there's also like adverse event reporting that you have to do with every experiment that you have. So that something like this hopefully will not happen again.
You know, this reminds me of a documentary I saw where they were trying to develop some sort of treatment for Alzheimer's. And the study was doing fine, but the research was going slow. So they wound up doing something additional to the animals. And because of that, it resulted in increased intelligence. And it was really unethical, and they wanted
Oh
not
my
have
god,
any
are you
results.
talking about Planet of the Apes?
No! I'm talking about Deep Blue Sea, obviously. Jesus Christ. Watch a movie, Robin.
Damn it!
They made the sharks smarter, people. So
I was like, is
It's
this
so
flowers for
dumb.
Algernon?
oh, that story's so sad. It's one of the
It's so
only things that
sad.
was on the assigned reading list that I actually read in 8th grade. And I remember reading it and being like, holy shit, this is depressing. Also, in 8th grade, we read The Outsiders.
I don't
And
know.
We did
The
too.
Outsiders is a book that was banned for a long time. It's about fucking gangs. Like, gangs fighting each other. It ends very, very violently. And all the kids that didn't read it, I know this is way off the point, but all the kids that didn't read it, we watched the movie. We got to watch the movie in 8th grade. It has like Patrick Swayze, Tom Cruise, Matt Dillon. Yeah, and he's hitting on this chick in a theater, and he basically says like, "Hey, does the head on your hair match the hair on your legs?" And he pauses, and in that moment, the class decided to pay attention, and someone was like, "What the fuck? Why are we allowed to watch this?" And she's like, "'Cause I fought to get you guys the right to read the book." She's like, "This is what the book is like too." And everyone just sort of realized in that moment, it's like, our teacher went to the school board so we could read a book that had been previously on the banned book list. Because she's like, it's important to read these things. And if you don't want a kid to read a book on the banned book list, put it on the required reading list, and I guarantee you most of them won't even have any interest in looking at it. But anyways.
I feel like we read a lot of like inappropriate books. Like looking back, you know, we read like Where the Red Fern Grows as like a 5th grader. And I was like, why? This is just like emotional trauma for like children.
Banned books. That would be fun to cover.
That would be a great episode.
All right. So cool. That was a really terrifying story of just medical gone wrong, right? Like,
It's nice to hear there's a level of accountability.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of accountability, I think this next story is going to highlight like even more scariness in medical history, and hopefully we're starting to address some of this now. But if you guys are ready, I have one more story for you guys.
All right.
We are all ears. I think I speak for all the spooky friends listening to this episode. We are eager to hear more.
I am all ears. I mean, I'm made of ears.
That would be terrifying.
That would be horrifying.
You know,
still
like that
love you,
one
though.
like cryptid that was like completely made of teeth or whatever.
Oh yeah.
That's the
Ugh.
grossest
Yep.
thing. I swear. I don't have like an aversion to teeth, but when it's a being made of teeth, I'm just like,
This is
no.
disgusting.
I like the view. I like the angels where like just a bunch of eyeballs and wings attached to each other.
Mhm.
Like those don't disturb me nearly as much as like the one guy who looks like just
Teeth.
a teeth humanoid.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just looking at Adam's teeth now, and I'm just like, imagine if your body was covered in teeth. It's like terrifying.
If you were
They're
a
just
person
white
made of ears
chiclets.
and I were a person made of teeth, would you still love me?
No.
Imagine what our kids would look like.
But I would want to be with another all ears person.
That's fucked up. That's super racist.
No,
Just
no,
saying.
no, I'm not being racist. I don't want teeth to cut me. Like, imagine all the ears rubbing up against each other. It's hot.
Ew.
Is that hot?
Teeth rubbing up
I'm
on...
glad we have a third person to hear the stupid shit that comes out of Robin's mouth sometimes, because that is not hot. That's cold as ice, dog. That's fucking gross.
But
You know,
it's
I
better
would
than
probably
the
still be
teeth.
Robin's friend if she was all ears, but I would not be your friend, Adam, if you were all teeth. I'd be too horrified.
That's fucked up.
Just
Robin would be like, somehow she would rub her ears together and be like, do you want to rub ears together? The sounds are glorious.
But it's like, imagine teeth rubbing on ears. No.
Oh, God.
I'm
like
gonna
that,
bite
like-
your ears in your sleep tonight.
I mean, some people are into that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, can you imagine just like that that teeth grinding sound?
Oh, no.
Oh,
Ugh.
gross.
Ugh.
You had a phrase you used during one of the Storytime episodes, between stories, the stuff that hits the cutting room floor from the chat, and it was like, don't yuck someone's yum? Something
Yeah.
along those lines. So there's a tooth person and an ear person that's a couple right now that are really offended. So I just want to apologize to both of them and say, burn yourselves alive, you're a hideous abomination.
Fucked up.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, my God.
So let's transition to your last story.
Let's transition to the next story because this is too horrifying. This is not just scary-ish. This is just scary. All right. So the next story I wanted to tell you guys, I titled "The Eugenics Disaster in Southern California."
In California?
I've
In
heard of eugenics. I
California.
did not
Eugenics
know
in
this happened in
California.
SoCal.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to talk about this story of eugenics, and specifically the story of forced sterilization in Los Angeles, which is a topic that unfortunately continues to affect gynecologic care and sterilization care until this day in the United States.
What?
Right. So it's a very sad story, I think, but also like very telling about just medical care for women and especially people of color. And so this is, of course, something that I care a lot about because I'm a gynecologist and I aim to try and give equitable care as much as possible. And I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I know you guys are now, in California. So I think this is a little bit kind of hits home for all of us. So I don't know if you guys know this, but some people may know, but one of the things that we as providers who do sterilization procedures for women is we have to sign a 30-day consent form before we're allowed to perform a sterilization procedure or at least get paid to do it for people with fallopian tubes if they have state insurance. So
What?
let that sink in for a second because there are a lot of issues with the sentence that I just said, right? So first of all, there's a 30-day consent form for sterilization for people who have fallopian tubes, but there is not for people who don't. So like if you want to get a vasectomy, you do not have to sign a 30-day consent form.
Wow.
So 30-day consent form means you sign it, you have to wait that period of time, so it's like a waiting period for a gun?
Exactly.
So you can
yes.
think better of your decision? That's so fucked up.
Yes.
But guys can just go in and get it.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So the second issue is this is only a requirement for people who have state insurance, so like Medicare, Medicaid, but not for people with commercial or private insurances. So we already have inequitable care because, as you can tell, this really only affects people who have state insurances. And usually these are people who potentially don't have as high of an income, who may not have as much access to healthcare in general.
So their reward is worse healthcare and persecution.
Exactly my point. So, you know, and like I've run into this where I have people who come into the hospital, they're laboring, they're having their child, and they say, you know what, this is the last child that I want to have. Please tie my tubes. And usually we're able to perform a postpartum tubal ligation while they're in the hospital. But if you have state insurance and you haven't signed this 30-day consent form, we are not allowed to tie your tubes because you have not signed this consent form. So, you know, I was like, when this was happening in my residency, and I was really mad about this. So I did a little digging, and I was like, why does this 30-day consent form exist? It's called the MA31, by the way, and it's from the federal government. And then when I kind of dug into this, I actually uncovered a lot of scariness in the history of women's health and forced sterilization that actually led to this consent form being created. And we'll talk about that a little bit and how it like kind of started in California and like in Los Angeles specifically. So just kind of a brief background. I think, you know, you guys said you've heard of the term eugenics, but the idea of it kind of came in the 1880s by some dude called Sir Francis Galton. And he essentially believed that like a person's ability to do anything, like their intelligence and all of that stuff, was dictated by their genetics, and through like selective breeding, we could somehow improve the overall quality of the human race, which is like big yikes, first of all. So this idea like quickly took on in some big names in medicine and science in the United States, including some guy named J.H. Kellogg in 1906 when he established the Race Betterment Foundation in Battle Creek, Michigan. And yes, that Kellogg, the guy with the cereal.
My God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, same dude. So he thought masturbation was bad for you. He thought that, you know, you should eat cornflakes so that you weren't like horny all the time. And he also thought interracial marriage was bad. And he also favored sterilization of quote unquote mentally defective persons.
Wow, what a
Not
POS.
a good
Seriously.
dude. Not a good dude.
I still eat Frosted Flakes though, just saying.
I don't eat Frosted Flakes. And I'm not going to list the other things that I clash with this guy on out of respect for the listener, but what the fuck?
Yeah. So anyway, not a good dude. But because of his work, by like the 1910s, there was this huge network of like scientists and professionals that were engaged in like the National Eugenics Project. And a huge proponent of this was actually the state of California. So it was the third state in the US to enact a sterilization law in 1909, which essentially allowed for state institutions like prisons, for example, to force sterilization on people who they thought were like unfit or like feeble-minded. Again, big yikes.
Yeah.
And by 1921, California had accounted for 80% of all the sterilizations nationwide because of this. So yeah, like
Wow.
California,
What?
right. It was a huge proponent of forced sterilization and eugenics. I mean, I still love
Oh my
California. It's
God.
where I'm from, but it's got a very shady history.
I will go ahead
and
and say anyone who wants to accredit that to current California, like 111 years or 113 years at this point, since this took place, there's been a lot of things have changed drastically across the world when it comes to how things are run. So don't freak out about this being like the current like administration in California or anything like that.
There's still all over the country these levels of inequity.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's insane.
I should also point out too, like one of the things I was talking about yesterday with our roommates is the fact that we talked about Imitation Game and the fact that despite the fact that this guy created Enigma, helped win the war, saved countless lives.
Yeah.
They
Just
still
because he was
found
gay.
out he was gay. This was in
They
like
sterilized him.
the late
Yeah.
40s, early 50s, around the time my dad's mom were born, and they, you know, sterilized him. They chemically castrated this man who was so important to the history of computers and saved so many folks. He's a literally like a worldwide hero.
Content warning.
And he killed himself in the end, right?
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, it's just a good example of like, that's something that happened that's just horrific to think about and so sad to talk about, but it's definitely changed by the time we are in 2022. So
Yeah,
Crazy.
It's crazy. So I kind of did a little bit more digging, and I was like, why did this happen in California, of all places, right? And it was actually because California was a place where there was a huge immigrant population. And so there were people in California who really wanted to like hurt and like stop like these quote unquote undesirables, because basically like the immigrant population was made up of people of Asian and Mexican descent. And so through the state of California, the eugenics movement took on the form of like, one, limiting the number of children that a woman on welfare could get state support for. So saying like, you know, you now have this many kids, you can't get any more welfare for the other kids that you're going to have. They also coerced women of color who needed a C-section and women on like illicit drugs to be sterilized. And then they also required potentially contraception or even sterilization as a term of probation. So like if you got in trouble with the law, the only way that you could go on probation is if you got your tubes tied or like you had to be on a form of birth control. Crazy. I know. It's like not great, right? Very scary and not great. So you know, all of this is like the early 1900s, right? And that sounds like, oh, it's like a really long time ago. The laws must have changed. Like things probably got better, right?
No.
But no, these laws like continue to be in effect and continue to affect all these people of color, especially Latino women in California, well into the latter half of the 20th century. And all of this came to a head in a trial of Madrigal versus Quilligan in 1976. And I will add that if you want to hear more about this really amazing story, you should check out the 2015 documentary called No Mas Bebés, which was created by Renee Tajima Peña, who like tells the story like so much better than I ever could. But anyway, you should check out that documentary.
As an aside, I gotta say, just because we've been talking about it, it's really weird the family's name is Madrigal, and we were talking about it earlier.
Yeah. So, like, during this time, like in the 1960s and 70s, this was, you know, when the Chicano movement was happening, which was like that social political movement to advocate against like the previous like racism against people of Mexican descent, which is, you know, a whole amazing story that like we can't get into today because that would be way too long. So this trial was a class action federal lawsuit by many Latina women who were forced to have sterilization at LA County Hospital, which is still a huge hospital in Southern California, and it's a very prestigious hospital associated with the University of Southern California, or USC, Trojans, and the Keck School of Medicine, right? So these are like institutions that I think like, they're like common household names, I think, right? Like most people know what USC is.
Yeah.
And so the main story is that this woman, Dolores Madrigal, had gone to LAC to give birth to her second child. And at that time, she was given a consent form and coerced by her doctors to have a tubal ligation. And she says that, you know, no one informed her that a tubal ligation procedure was going to be performed, and they didn't explain what it was to her, and they didn't explain like the permanent effects of a tubal ligation to her, essentially. And so she and a few other women basically all came together and had very, very similar stories, and I'm going to list their names because I do think that it's important to like know who they are. So the women were Guadalupe Acosta, Estela Benavides, Consuelo Hermosillo, Georgina Hernandez, Maria Hurtado, Maria Figueroa, Rebecca Figueroa, Jovita Rivera, and Helena Orozco. And they all sued LA County together, and they all had these similar stories of essentially never having been given informed consent about the tubal ligation. And allegedly at that time, the head of OBGYN, Dr. Edward James Quilligan at USC, had asserted that, you know, quote unquote, poor minority women in LA County were having too many babies, and that it was a strain on society, and that it was good that they be sterilized.
Wow.
Yikes.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah, so this was like super horrible, and it's, you know, it's also important, I think, to like kind of highlight that many of these women didn't speak English as their first language. And so a lot of them, when they were signing this consent form, which was in English, didn't understand what they were signing. And one of the witnesses, like the only one who spoke out against the physicians at LAC, had said that the hospital had also received a federal grant to try and cut the birth rate among Mexican and Black people in LA County.
A federal grant.
Right.
What the fuck?
What?
I mean, I think it's
insane.
It's just like so, like, there's a lot of like, I think, mistrust of the medical system by a lot of people of color. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of good history to kind of reinforce that. And like when we go into these stories, we kind of understand like why women, why people of color mistrust the medical system, because stuff like this happened. And it didn't happen that long ago. Like 1976, you know, those people, like those women, their like children and grandchildren are the one who are now coming to us as OBGYNs, potentially like having babies and like requesting contraception. So it really wasn't that long ago that all of this happened. Essentially, unfortunately, the ruling of the judge was that the doctors at LA County didn't do anything wrong, and Judge Jessie Curtis ruled in favor of the medical center and held that the sterilizations were a result of miscommunication and language barriers between the patients and doctors. And he also said that the procedure was not objectionable if a physician believed that a tubal ligation could improve a perceived overpopulation problem.
What?
Overpopulation problem.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. As long as the physician did not try to overpower the will of his patient.
That's like treating them like animals.
Yeah.
Where it's like overpopulation. Like you can't, what the fuck?
It's infuriating.
Yeah. And in the very end, basically, this judge said that the women were at fault because their cultural background heightened the supposed trauma they experienced. So I know you
cultural background of not wanting their baby makers illegally taken from them. What cultures think that that's okay to do?
Yeah, I know. And Adam, you are angry. Like, listeners, if you are not piping mad right now and want you to go down and just like tear down all the institutions, like, what are you doing right now? Right? Like, just like. And here's the thing is like, you don't learn about this stuff in medical school. I feel like we as, you know, physicians, like, should be taught about these like horrible things that happened in our history. And be like, okay, these are bad things that happened. Try not to do this again. But like, these are things that I think, you know, we're not really taught, and we're kind of just like, you know, we just like kind of start to find out. And like, even now, like, these are stories that I'm learning in my own profession where I was like, wow, you know, it really makes sense why some of my patients don't want to come to the doctor. Like, I wouldn't either if this was like my grandmother's experience or my mom's experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, my dad, he was born in 1955 for reference, but my dad has always been of the mindset where it's like, don't go to the doctor will kill you. And he got that from his parents, you know, who immigrated here.
Yeah.
They came from Puerto Rico, and they had that very palpable sense of you cannot trust a medical professional. And it's been, you know, years of me trying to convince him to like go and see a doctor just to sort of get checked up on. And that distrust exists in him to this day, and it'll never go away for his entire life. I don't share it, but at the same time, I 100% understand where it comes from.
Yeah, totally. So some good news from the story, because like I know we're all like very mad right now. So the good news is that, you know, even though this ruling did not rule in favor of the women who were suing LA County, it did lead to reform in sterilization, and the forms for consent were then created in multiple languages. Number one, to help patients understand the procedure, so like to make sure that they actually have informed consent. They created these laws where patients under the age of 21 would have 72 hours to think about this choice. They also made it so that welfare benefits could not be terminated if someone does not have a sterilization. And then ultimately, this MA31 form, the form that we were talking about that makes you wait 30 days, was developed in the mid-1970s. Again, it was initially created to protect these vulnerable populations from coerced sterilization because, you know, the 30-day waiting period made it easier for patients to research the procedure and also to decline the procedure. And it made it so that, like, the doctors couldn't say, here, sign this piece of paper, we're going to tie your tubes right now.
That's so crazy.
In the current day and age, it also creates other inequities, but like having learned this history, I'm like, okay, I guess it kind of
makes sense. It was a form for
sense.
Protection originally.
Yeah.
And now it is used basically against sort of the same people who had that sort of inequity to begin with. But
right.
It's at least it had an origin in protection, I guess, is a good way to put it. Wow. That is educational and definitely scary-ish.
Yeah, definitely scary-ish.
So one of the things that's, you mentioned eugenics at the beginning of this, we talked about the whole thing. And just sort of to like walk us out of this is that there are so many things that eugenics is still a part of, or were rooted in eugenics that most people don't know. And
well, I would like to remind everyone the whole thing with like the Nazi movement and wiping out the whole Jewish population was a form of eugenics.
Yeah, built around the prejudice of that party.
Yeah.
One of the things that's like kind of terrifying to know is that in all the corporate environments I've ever been in, especially office environments, they typically have you take sort of a leadership test, or sometimes they call it a personality test, where they assign you an arbitrary set of numbers or letters, to tell you like, oh, I'm an MDCA or I'm an I, or I'm a PI. And most of those were actually rooted in identifying folks who were supposed to be essentially culled.
What?
They started in the eugenics movement, and these personality tests that folks take to tell you whether or not they're like, an introvert or whether or not they learn in different ways was specifically so that they could gather information regarding your personality traits, because they had already decided which ones were desirable and which ones were not. And there is one specific test. I don't remember which one it is, but I was taking it. I had trainings. I had leadership trainings at one of my jobs, and one of the people that was there brought it up, and they mentioned like this test was originally used to sort people so that people would be eliminated or be kept from basically breeding, and they were 100% uncomfortable with it being perpetuated within our corporation, and they were basically told like, too fucking bad. And the craziest thing about it is that company that I worked at that was using it was legitimately using it to figure out who they wanted to get rid of. Like, who would be resistant to, like, shitty leadership.
You cannot
Who would
do
call
that.
down their supervisors, things like that.
Oh
and I
my
sat in
God.
meetings where there's, like, this person came back as, like, these two combinations of 4 letters, so we know they're going to be a problem every time we try and change something. I was just sitting there like, holy fucking shit. Like, these folks are literally still using it, almost for the designed purposes, but just to
That is
destroy
so
people's
scary.
careers instead of their lives and their legacies. So, it's definitely something worth looking into of like what still has like traces to eugenics that exists in like current society. But, yeah. Awesome stuff, Faye. This has been super educational, scary-ish, sometimes outright scary, sometimes hilarious.
Sometimes outright.
And also infuriating at times.
infuriating. Yeah.
Yes, without a doubt.
Exactly.
So, either way, thank you for coming on. If you ever want to come back on, there's an open invitation to join us.
Yep.
So.
Oh, thanks, you guys.
If you guys are sitting here fascinated by how brilliant Faye sounds, she also has a medical podcast. I think she was like, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of crossover with the audiences, but I do think it's a very impressive show. So I would love it if you would just plug it really quickly, because you should be incredibly proud of it. And if people want to hear about it, especially if you're into the medical fields, it is definitely something that I think is an incredible asset for folks out there.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me on the show. This is really great. And I just want to say that, like, I found your show when I was, like, in the depths of despair of my residency.
What?
And I was like, oh, great. These people are, like, talking about, like, scary-ish things. And it, like, got me through some of those, like, oh, my God, I, like, hate my life right now because I'm a resident. So anyway.
Oh, no.
Thank you for having me on the show. And again, I feel like I, like, highlight all these bad things about medicine, but, like, obviously this is, like, my career and I really love it. And, there are lovely things about medicine and medical school and residency. But yes, thank you again for having me on the podcast. So I do a show called Creogs Over Coffee. Creogs is the like in-service exam that all OBGYN residents have to take. So I have a 20-30 minute podcast that we run every week that goes over a topic. It is oriented towards medical professionals. So I feel like a lot of times like we use terms that generally we don't always explain for like the average listener. But if you want to check it out, it's called Creogs Over Coffee. It's found on like all places you can find podcasts.
And you also do, D&D podcast.
I do.
Quest Was Won.
You're like the busiest human being I know. You have How the Quest Was Won. You have Creogs Over Coffee. You're a fucking doctor. Like, you have so much stuff on your plate. So the fact that you took time out of your schedule to join us and tell us these amazing things, we really appreciate it. And I think I speak for Robin on this one. And if not, you can correct me. We're very happy we could help you in any way, shape, or form by being our stupid, silly selves.
Yeah.
And it really means a lot to us that we were able to connect with you through something as weird as Scaryish. And that goes for pretty much everyone in the Spooky Friends community who we've gotten to know. Even if it's through, like, we call you Captain Fakeye. That's clearly not your real name, but it's what we know you as. So
Yeah.
It's kind of an amazing thing that's happened, and we appreciate you. And it's because of people like you, Faye, and people that are in the community that support each other. And you guys are all absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you beyond words. And thank you so much for joining me and Garrett's weird asses on the Wheel of Time show about the Wheel of Time show, and dedicating yourself to reading the series, which she's already on book 6 out of 14. It's a very impressive feat. Yeah, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I think that's pretty much everything we're going to have for this episode. So we'll do the normal plug stuff. If you guys want to reach out to us regarding any of these topics we've talked about today, or any particular story that you've had that's supernatural, paranormal, coincidental, true crime or extraterrestrial nature, or maybe just medical scary stuff we could include too, feel free to email storytime@scaryish.com. Hit us up on our website, scaryish.com. You click on Contact Us. There's a form you can fill out that comes directly to us. Or our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scariyishpodcast. Twitter is @scariyishpod. And Instagram is @scariyishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scariyishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free and access to a couple other small little tidbitty extras. If you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to coffeeko-fi.com/scariyishpodcast. And those are all one-time donations. And please, everybody go over on the Twitters to support Captain Fakeye. What is it? At how the quest was won? I think that is the Twitter handle, right?
Yeah, at How the Quest.
Oh, How the Quest.
Yeah.
That.
And on your podcasts, go find all these shows, download them, listen to them, support.
Yeah.
It really does mean the world to podcasters when they have viewers, they have listeners, and they have people out there that they realize are consuming their content. So help Faye out, because you should, goddammit. So
yeah.
I think that's just about everything that we have for this episode of Scaryish. So Robin, oh no, wait, we usually have the special guest do it. Faye, go ahead and sign us out.
All right, so keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.